All right, this is my daily push Donna Edwards for Senate from the state of Maryland. And I just want to let you know that I am absolutely biased in this regard. You're going to see several people that are going to comment in here, and there is one of them that I am particularly pissed off about, and that person is Jonathan Gayhart. Now, his actual name is Jonathan Capehart, but I call him Jonathan Gayhart, and it's not. It may be taken as a slur. For that, obviously I apologize. But that guy, I have no respect for him whatsoever. He is a beta black male. I lost respect for him when he was on the Morning Joe show, and Mika Brzezinski basically disrespected him to his face, and he crawled away like a little meek goddamn puppy instead of standing up to her and backing her down like most of the alpha males that appear on the Morning Joe show that have a problem with her. And that problem got so bad one time that even Joe Scarborough had to back her up on her disrespect to a senior black politician. She basically was off the show for about a week. I don't know if it was sanctioned or whatever, but she was off the show for a week. But in this area, Jonathan Capehart is going to express his opinion, which is basically following the Democratic establishment line. So anyway, here's the clip.
November 8th could turn out to be an historic election day for the United States Senate if two candidates, Maryland Representative Donna Edwards and California Attorney General Kamala Harris, join former Senator Carol Moseley Braun as the only African-American women ever to be elected to the upper chamber. But although Harris and Edwards are poised to share the same historical moment, they will have arrived there on very different paths. Harris won the endorsement of the Congressional Black Caucus's Political Action Committee back in December of last year. However, as Politico reported in February, the CBC PAC decided to withhold its endorsement for Donna Edwards, a move that was largely seen as a snub to her campaign. Politico called the non-endorsement unusual for the CBC PAC, particularly in a primary as close as the Maryland contest has been. The race to replace retiring Senator Barbara Mikulski has become highly charged around questions of race and gender, as Edwards has fought to stay competitive against her opponent, Chris Van Hollen.
Now, let me say this. The Congressional Black Caucus PAC, for those of you who don't know, the leadership is made up of, the membership is made up of 21 individuals. There are 3 leaders, actual leaders in the PAC itself. Of those 21 members, only 8 are the elected officials from the Congressional Black Caucus. The other 13 are all lobbyists for various industries, including big tobacco, big oil, pharmaceuticals, even, God forbid, the industrial private prison complex. These people are all beholden to these particular special interest groups and derive a lot of their money from them. So guess which way they're going? They're going to follow the wishes of their particular industries. Now, Chris Van Hollen is a favorite of Nancy Pelosi. He comes from the richest district in the state of Maryland, whereas Donna Edwards comes from one of the, shall we say, less economically advantaged districts. Chris Van Hollen, true enough, was elected to the House of Representatives, and as soon as he got there, Nancy Pelosi took him under her wing, and while the Democrats were in power, gave him some significant chairmanships. After that was done, she gave him the responsibility for the DNCC, which was the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Committee, whose job it was to help Democrats get elected. That gift was given to him in 2008. In 2010, obviously the Democrats got demolished, and he basically chose not to run to be in charge of that particular committee because of his abject failure. But anyway, I'm giving you a bunch of history here. Donna Edwards basically doesn't smooth with these guys, and she's not a favorite of Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi has the Congressional Black Caucus, which is made up primarily of members of the House of Representatives. Pelosi's got them in her pocket, so they can't out and out endorse Van Hollen, but their endorsement of Donna Edwards would have been a great help. To me, the Congressional Black Caucus itself hasn't really endorsed Donna Edwards, and that to me is a failure, because the number one charter, the number one goal that they have is to get black politicians elected, and they are failing in their duty as far as Donna Edwards' position is concerned.
House Democrat with deep pockets, the support of several prominent national Democrats, and a 16-point lead in the most recent polls. And according to Politico this week, just days before the election, Edwards approached CBC PAC leaders with one question about their endorsement snub: why? And joining me now to try and answer that question, Washington Post writer and MSNBC contributor Jonathan Capehart, and Politico's Elena Schneider. And joining me from Baltimore is radio host Marc Steiner. So, Elena.
Okay, so this guy, Mark, is going to give you the real deal on what's going on the ground as far as the black community is concerned. The lady, and you'll get her name again, she's pretty much going to be on the up and up. It's going to be Jonathan Capehart that's basically going to be trying to blow smoke up everybody's ass.
I want to come right to you and ask you just that very question. Why hasn't Donna Edwards gotten the support of the CBC PAC?
It's a great question. She, back in 2008, ran against Al Wing, who's a popular member of the CBC, and she beat him. And so ever since then, they've had a bit of a strange relationship between the two.
Yeah, because she beat one of their sweethearts in the Congressional Black Caucus. So he lost. What happens? He goes and becomes a lobbyist for the very people that we're supposedly fighting against, which this lady is going to confirm.
Her in that group, and her defenders will say that she hasn't sort of hobnobbed with them in the way that people maybe like to be treated that way, and she's instead decided to focus, as they say, on sort of being a congresswoman, and I think that strange relationship hasn't really been repaired.
Is it that simple, Jonathan? Could it just be that she just doesn't personally get along with other members of the CBC?
That's one part of it. The other...
Okay, now here comes a lie that Jonathan Capehart's going to tell. Okay, and I'll comment after he completes the lie.
Part of it is, you talk to anyone in her district, they don't like Donna Edwards because her constituent services, this is what Congress people pride themselves on, being responsive to the people who sent them to office. And you will hear many people say, I make a phone call to her office, she doesn't call me back.
Now, first he said, you ask anybody, then he just said many. That being said, I challenge anybody to call their local member of the House of Representatives and there's always issues you can call them on. Just call them. See if you get a call back from them. No matter how important the issue is, see if you get a call back from them. They don't call back. None of them do. Okay? Now, sometimes they have staff that may call back, but they themselves do not call back. Send them an email. You will get an automated response that your email was received, but you will never get an actual response back to with an answer to your question unless it's something that's absolutely earth-shattering. So as far as responsiveness to the constituents, he's full of shit.
And on top of that, when you're in the House and you're a Democrat and you've got these fundraising goals that you have to meet, well, she hasn't met a lot of them. And so for the CBC to not endorse an African-American woman in a state where the black vote is a huge portion of the Democratic vote, that sends an incredible signal. It has a lot more to do than just, challenging Al Wynn or just being unpopular with some members. There's some deeper stuff going on.
Okay, now my question is this. He just conflated two different things. He said, as a Democrat in the House, you have fundraising goals, okay? Then he flipped that into the Congressional Black Caucus, stating that's why that they're not supporting this. Obviously, overall, democratically, that would be one thing. But again, the Congressional Black Caucus's number one goal is to get black politicians elected. So the fundraising part should be secondary.
And Mark, Elijah Cummings, I was in West Baltimore on Penn and North as Elijah Cummings walked through that neighborhood. He's incredibly popular. For her not to have his endorsement feels like it would be really problematic for her. You're on the radio 5 days a week. What are your listeners saying? What are people in Baltimore saying about this idea that potentially only the third black woman who could be a United States Senator just does not seem to have African-American institutional support?
Well, she might have the institutional support, but she does have the support of African-American voters in Maryland.
Exactly.
And that's one thing that's very clear. And I think it's more complex than that. I think that when you look at the CBC in many ways is funded by a lot of corporate interests. Al Wynn was clearly, he now works for tobacco and works for big energy.
So what did I say? The CBC is funded by corporate interests, and these motherfuckers are not basically supporting the people that they should be supporting. They're supporting the people that the corporate interests want supported.
And I think that this is also dividing on racial lines. People don't pay attention a lot to what is being said by some of the kind of pundits around. This race is being divided on race. You see it in Baltimore. You see it in Prince George's County. And I think I think in some ways she's an outsider. She has been an outsider. She's an outsider of the CBC. And there are all these stories about her not having good constituent service, but she keeps getting reelected. So, I mean, it's a complex question. It's not as simple as her not having constituent services, and I think it has a lot to do with what has happened inside the CBC in terms of who supports them as well.
Jonathan?
Well, I mean, fine.
Okay, now say there's Jonathan Gayhart basically conceding the points that he just made, so now he's going to try to come up with some other bullshit line.
She's maybe popular in her district with some people, but she's running statewide against a candidate who is extremely popular both within the establishment, not to Mark, but I think also around the state. I mean, you just showed, what was the poll there? She's 56 to 32, something like that?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's something that Donna Edwards has to reckon with, and I think come to.
Okay, so now you have two people. Both of them are in the House of Representatives, okay? They are representative of their districts. So now he wants to conflate her not running well statewide versus Van Hollen running well statewide. That is a function of the Democratic machine, the Democratic establishment, Nancy Pelosi sucking in the Congressional Black Caucus and all of the other Democratic members that are floating around the state of Maryland to push for this fucking guy. I take that back. He's a decent guy, Chris Van Hollen, but he's an establishment guy, okay? He's an establishment guy, and Donna wants to come in and make changes. Now, honestly, their congressional records are pretty much exactly the same. So this is coming down to a personality contest. Van Hollen, the privileged white guy, versus Edwards, a black woman who came up the hard way.
Tuesday. It'll be interesting to see how close the actual vote percentages are to that poll.
And to that point, you know, and it's interesting because there's sort of shades of sort of the Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton phenomenon and what we just heard Marc Steiner say. But if you look at what Crispin Holland has been able to amass, a letter from 100 black women that they're sort of touting from his campaign, showing that he's got sort of institutional support from African Americans. Then you have the Baltimore Sun talking about 1,011 Democratic women coming out in support of Van Holland. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have Emily's list, which has not, you know, maybe they just haven't had a lot to work with, but African American women not usually the top, you know, priority. They are coming out in favor of Donna Edwards. You do have these weird sort of amalgamations of race and gender going on inside of this race.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating that it's sort of broken down into a bit of a proxy war of what's happening in the Democratic Party. You've got Van Holland, who's incredibly close with, you know, Nancy Pelosi, who's been a deal maker, and then you've got Donna Edwards, who's talking about her outsider status and how she's been a stalwart progressive, sort of sounding more like Bernie Sanders. And that breakdown also then gets a little more complicated because obviously African Americans have overwhelmingly supported Hillary Clinton, but in this, they're supporting someone like Donna Edwards, who sounds a little bit like Bernie Sanders.
And that's interesting, Marc, because it does feel like there is, even in your presentation of it, kind of almost a Sanders versus Clinton sort of vibe to the race. But in that case, Clinton is usually the one who's coming out on top with African Americans. Is there an age difference between the African American supporters of Chris Van Hollen and the African American supporters of Donna Edwards?
I don't think so. I really think different polls have shown different things. There's a 9-point gap. There's a larger gap in the poll you just showed, I think. But the black vote in Maryland in the primary is significant. And what you're going to see is, I think, that there is a fervor inside the black community in the state of Maryland, in Baltimore City, and in Prince George's County, to have more black representation. And I think it means a huge amount to most black voters in Maryland to have a black woman representing this state in the Senate. I think that's a factor here. You're also seeing that a lot of progressive and liberals who are white are saying she has terrible constituent service. Some people think that's a dog whistle. Some people think that's real. And I think that, so it's, and Van Hollen is extremely popular. People like him. He's a nice man. People think and on the votes, they're almost 100% similar.
Which is what I said.
On the votes. So I think that you really are seeing, I think, in many ways at this moment, a real serious racial divide. Some people say it's fueled by the establishment's dislike of Donna Edwards. Some say it's her fault because... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's interesting because it's so Higher Heights for Women, which is an organization that helps African-American women to try to get elected. They're behind her. To your point, there is a lot of direct sort of appealing to these issues of gender and race, including by Donna Edwards. I want to read you guys what she said in BuzzFeed about this very issue. She said, "I'm dumbfounded," this is Donna Edwards speaking, "by Democrats who don't see the value of race and gender as part of a mix of who we are in public and private lives. When I began this race, I decided that I was going to run as who I am. I am a black woman. There's no hiding that, nor would I want to." At the same time, Jonathan, when you talk to people sort of on the CBC side of this equation, they say, well, that is not what she has done in terms of her politics as a member of Congress.
Right. I mean, look, one of the things about the day and age that we're in is that people can look at candidates and see that, yes, she's African American, she's a woman, she's a black woman in elective office, and decide, you know what? I don't want to vote for you. That I have the freedom to not vote for you. And so for Donna Edwards to sort of put out there that, you know, she's being all who she is, and because of that she's being rejected, it could have very much to do with the fact that they meaning voters, meaning CBC members, don't like the way she plays the game. Yeah. It could be that simple.
And Alina, you did the other reporting on this for Politico. So in the end, what does the Democratic Party in Maryland do here? Because you do have this African-American woman. There is an imperative, obviously, to appeal to voters of color that has resonance in the presidential campaign. Is the Democratic Party in Maryland in a pickle here?
I certainly think they are in a bit of a pickle, and some people, like the retiring senator, has decided to stay completely out of it. And some people are just trying to not pick sides at all and just sort of let the voters decide in this. But yes, they are certainly in a difficult situation.
Yeah, this feels like the Gordian knot of all Gordian knots for the Democratic Party. All right, thank you very much to Elena Schneider.
Yeah, so anyway, this is going to be a tough one. And that 15 points that you saw, that's bullshit. That race is a hell of a lot closer than 15 points. And I am pissed off at Elijah Cummings because he damn sure should have came out for her. You know, as a matter of fact, he should have ran for the job himself, and then we wouldn't even be talking about this.